Hey guys. Tonight we drift somewhere colder, quieter, and far less forgiving than your bedroom right now. You're here, half awake, maybe scrolling on your phone, thinking history is something that happens to other people. In other times, in grainy black and white photos. But as your eyes grow heavy, you find yourself standing somewhere unfamiliar. The air already sharp, already biting. This story doesn't rush, it doesn't shout, it simply takes your hand and walks you forward, step by careful step, into a place where comfort is a rumor and survival is a full-time job. And honestly, between you and me, you probably wouldn't make it. Not because you're weak, but because this place was designed to grind everyone down eventually. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of a moment you didn't plan. 1 second ago, life felt ordinary, too ordinary to even notice. Now, you're being watched, not obviously, not dramatically, but in that quiet, unsettling way where you just know. History books often describe arrests as events, dates, decrees, official language. What they don't capture is this feeling. This slow realization that the rules have changed and no one bothered to tell you. You're in the Soviet Union, late 1930s or early 1940s. The exact year almost doesn't matter. It's during the height of a system that prides itself on efficiency, suspicion, and paperwork. A knock comes at the door. Not loud, not violent. That's important. The knock is calm, polite, even. Many survivors later said that was the most frightening part. When something terrible arrives politely, your brain doesn't know how to react. You open the door. There are uniforms, faces that look bored, tired, mildly inconvenienced by your existence. You're informed, calmly, that you need to come with them. No explanation that makes sense. Maybe none at all. This happened thousands of times during the Great Purge, a well-known historical event where arrests became almost routine. What's less well known is that many officers arresting you don't know why you're being taken either. They're following lists, names, quotas. Historians still debate how much of the system was driven by ideology and how much by sheer bureaucratic momentum. You try to remember if you did something wrong, said something wrong, thought something wrong. That's the problem. You don't need an answer. Guilt isn't required here. You might be an engineer, a teacher, a farmer who once complained about bread. Or maybe you're just associated with someone else who vanished last winter. In this world, proximity can be a crime. As you're escorted outside, you notice how normal everything still looks. Street lamps glow. Somewhere, someone laughs. This is not the dramatic collapse of civilization you might expect. It's quieter than that, like missing a step on the stairs, sudden, disorienting, and already too late. You'd probably think, this must be a mistake. Almost everyone did. That thought alone might keep you compliant, cooperative, hopeful, not great survival instincts. As it turns out, you're loaded into a vehicle, sometimes a truck, sometimes a car, sometimes just marched through streets you recognized too well. You don't resist. Very few people do. Resistance, historians note, was rare not because people trusted the system, but because the system had already trained them not to imagine alternatives. Also, let's be honest, you're not exactly dressed for a daring escape right now. At the holding facility, time starts to behave strangely. You wait, hours, maybe days. Interrogations come and go. Lights stay on. Sleep becomes fragmented. This isn't yet the Gulag, but it's the doorway to it. A surprisingly common fact is that many prisoners signed confessions to crimes they didn't commit. Just to end the questioning, exhaustion is persuasive like that. Modern sleep deprivation studies confirm what the system already knew intuitively. Eventually, a decision is made, not necessarily about truth, about logistics. You're sentenced. The paperwork is stamped, and just like that, your future shrinks to a series of transport steps. You might not hear the word Gulag spoken aloud. Many prisoners didn't at first. It was simply the camps, said with the same tone you'd use for bad weather. Here's the strange part. At this moment, you might still believe you'll survive. After all, people survive prisons all the time, right? You've watched documentaries. You've seen movies. You think you understand hardship. But those comparisons are like bringing a phone charger to a lightning storm. Technically related, practically useless. As you wait for transport, you notice others like you. Silent, avoiding eye contact, already conserving energy in small, unconscious ways. Someone whispers a rumor about Siberia. Someone else laughs, too loudly, like it's a joke. It's not. Gulag camps were scattered across vast, remote regions, chosen deliberately for isolation and natural punishment. Cold is cheaper than walls. You're still wearing your old clothes. That won't last. You still think in terms of days and plans. That won't last either. What you don't realize, what you couldn't realize yet, is that survival here isn't about strength or bravery. It's about margins, tiny margins, a crust of bread, a warmer spot on a wooden plank, one less hour of standing still in the wind. As you're finally moved toward the train, you catch one last familiar sound, a city noise, a human noise. It fades quickly. Historians still argue whether the system was designed to kill or simply didn't care if it did. Standing here, on the edge of what comes next, that distinction already feels academic. You step forward because you're told to, because everyone else does, because the alternative is unthinkable. And somewhere deep down, a small part of you still believes this is temporary. That belief is about to be tested. You don't get a proper goodbye to the place you're leaving. There's no cinematic pause where you look back and sigh. Instead, you're nudged forward, paperwork leading the way like it's the real authority here. The arrest has already happened. This is the administrative aftertaste. And like all bad aftertastes, it lingers longer than you want. You're herded into a holding cell that smells like damp wool and old breath. It's crowded, but not loudly so. People conserve sound here the way others conserve money. Every cough feels like an announcement. Every movement has to be negotiated with 3 other bodies. If you've ever tried to sit comfortably in an airplane seat between 2 strangers, imagine that, but colder, darker, and with the unshakable sense that no one is offering peanuts. This stage of the process was so common during the height of the mass arrests that it barely earned special attention in official records. The Great Purge, there it is. The famous event everyone's heard of, wasn't just about executions or show trials. It was about processing, arrest, hold, transfer, repeat. What's less commonly mentioned is how long people could remain in limbo here. Days blurred into weeks. Some prisoners later said this waiting period was worse than the camps themselves. At least the camps had a routine. Here, uncertainty does all the work. You try to keep track of time. You really do. But without windows, without clocks, without reliable meals, time becomes more of a suggestion than a fact. You start measuring it by things like hunger cycles and guard shifts. Even that's unreliable. A lesser-known detail is that some holding facilities intentionally varied meal times to disorient prisoners. Whether this was policy or improvisation is unclear. Historians still debate how standardized psychological pressure techniques really were across different regions. Interrogations resume, but they're different now. Less intense, more procedural. The questions repeat, sometimes word for word, like someone forgot to hit save on a form. You realize, slowly, that your answers no longer matter. They already have what they need: a confession, a signature, a classification. Your role now is logistical compliance. Stand here, sit there, sign this. No, not there, there. At some point, someone reads your sentence aloud. The words land strangely, like hearing your own name mispronounced. Corrective labor. It sounds almost wholesome, like a wellness retreat that involves shoveling. You're not told where. Distance, after all, is part of the punishment. If you don't know where you're going, you can't imagine returning. You're issued new clothing. Calling it a uniform would be generous. It's more like a collection of compromises. Fabric that's too thin. Boots that don't quite agree with your feet. A coat that smells like several previous owners and one unresolved sadness. Fun fact, well, fun might be a stretch, but many Gulag-issued garments were recycled endlessly. Patched until the original material became more rumor than substance. Warmth was theoretical. The transfer begins at night. It often did. Fewer witnesses, fewer questions. You're marched outside, and the cold greets you like an old enemy who's been working out. The air feels heavier now. Sharper. Breathing requires effort, which seems unnecessary, but here you are, doing it anyway. You're loaded into a transport vehicle, sometimes called a Black Maria. Though there's nothing poetic about it. Inside, it's dark and cramped. Knees knock, shoulders press. Someone whispers a prayer. Someone else mutters a joke about finally getting to travel, which earns exactly one short, humorless laugh. That's joke number one. By the way, you'll notice humor doesn't thrive here. It survives in small, fragile bursts. The vehicle stops, starts, stops again. Eventually, you're transferred to a train station. This is where things begin to feel permanent. The train cars aren't designed for passengers. They're designed for cargo that complains occasionally. Boxcars, often with wooden bunks stacked like shelves. A hole in the floor serves as a toilet, which is both efficient and deeply offensive to human dignity. As you're packed in, you notice guards counting, recounting, arguing quietly. Numbers matter more than names now. A lesser-known reality is that overcrowding during transport was so extreme that some prisoners didn't survive the journey itself. Not dramatically, just quietly. Slumped in a corner, unnoticed until unloading. Logistics again. The train lurches forward. There's a moment. Just one. where your body expects the world to make sense again. It doesn't. The rhythm of the tracks becomes your new soundtrack. If you're lucky, you get a spot on a bunk. If not, you stand. For hours. For days. Shifting weight becomes an art form. Modern fitness influencers would call it isometric training. You call it agony. That's joke number 2, if you're counting. Food arrives irregularly. Water too. Guards sometimes forget. Sometimes they don't forget and just don't care. There are stories, confirmed by multiple memoirs, of prisoners melting snow through cracks in the car just to drink something. It's winter-adjacent survival, minus the inspirational music. You begin to learn the first real rule of this world. Energy is everything. Speaking costs energy. Thinking costs energy. Anger costs the most. You start letting things go, not because you forgive, but because you can't afford to carry them. That realization is subtle, but it changes you. Someone near you talks about where you're headed. Kalima, Vorkuta, names that mean nothing now but soon will feel like curses with geography attached. These regions were chosen for a reason: remote, resource-rich, and naturally hostile. Why build walls when nature will do it for free? As the train rattles on, your body adjusts in small, worrying ways. Hunger becomes dull instead of sharp. Cold becomes background noise. This is adaptation, and it's not heroic, it's mechanical. Historians still debate whether this capacity for adaptation helped prisoners survive or simply prolonged their suffering. You lean your head against the wooden wall. It vibrates steadily. Somewhere, someone snores softly. Someone else cries without sound. And you think, briefly, dangerously, that maybe you can handle this. That thought is comforting. It's also almost certainly wrong. The train keeps moving, and with every mile, the world you came from becomes less real. Like a dream you didn't bother to write down before waking up. The train doesn't announce its destinations. It just keeps moving, dragging you eastward as if geography itself has decided you're overdue for punishment. At some point, you stop trying to guess where you are. Forest looks like forest. Snow looks like snow. Distance becomes theoretical, like trying to imagine how big the internet is while staring at one web page. Inside the boxcar, the air has developed a personality, and it's not a friendly one. It's stale, damp, and faintly sweet in that alarming way that suggests too many human bodies and not enough ventilation. Every breath feels recycled. You start recognizing smells not as unpleasant or pleasant, but as familiar or unfamiliar. That's your new standard. Congratulations on the downgrade. The train stops occasionally, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours. No one explains why. Guards shout orders that don't apply to you. Doors stay shut. Then, without warning, the train lurches forward again. The uncertainty messes with your sense of control, which, according to psychologists studying captivity decades later, is one of the fastest ways to exhaust the human mind. Historians still debate whether this unpredictability was intentional or simply a side effect of a system that didn't value clarity. From where you're standing, the result feels the same. Food arrives through the door like a rumor, a ladle of thin soup. A chunk of bread that feels lighter each time you receive it. The bread is dark, dense, and slightly sour. It sticks to your teeth. That's not a flaw, it's a feature. Slow chewing makes it last longer. You learn that quickly. Someone near you tries to save half for later and fails. Hunger has terrible manners. You notice the hierarchy forming even here. People who've done this before, repeat prisoners. Politicals turned criminals by circumstance, move differently. They claim corners, position themselves near bunks, negotiate space with glances instead of words. You watch and learn, because watching costs less energy than making mistakes. A lesser-known detail is that seasoned prisoners were sometimes more afraid of new arrivals than guards were. Desperation is unpredictable. At night, or what you assume is night, based on exhaustion rather than darkness, you drift in and out of sleep. Dreams are strange now. They don't feel like stories. They feel like interruptions. You wake up disoriented, unsure whether the wooden wall is real or just another dream layer you haven't escaped yet. Someone starts coughing. It's deep, persistent, and worryingly wet. No one comments. In transport, illness spreads quickly and quietly. Tuberculosis was especially common, thriving in exactly these conditions. It's a historical fact that TB followed the Gulag system like an unofficial mascot. Still, in this moment, it's just a sound you try not to listen to too closely. The train stops longer this time. The doors slide open with a scream of metal that feels almost celebratory. Cold air floods in, shocking and immediate. You gasp before you can stop yourself. That was a mistake. Breathing too fast in this cold hurts. Like inhaling needles. Guards shout, "You're ordered out." Stepping onto the platform feels unreal. Your legs don't fully trust you anymore. Balance is a negotiation. The ground is packed snow. Slick and uneven. You see buildings, low. Utilitarian. Aggressively gray. This isn't the camp yet. It's a transfer point. A way station in a system that specializes in not letting you settle. You're counted, recounted. Someone is missing. No one asks questions. A number is adjusted. That's logistics again, doing what it does best. A lesser-known reality is that record-keeping errors were common, and prisoners could vanish on paper long before they did physically. Historians still argue how many deaths were administrative before they were biological. You're herded into another holding area. This time colder and louder. Wind slips through cracks in the walls like it's been invited. Someone makes a quiet joke about the accommodations improving. That's joke number 3. It earns a few tired smiles. Which is basically a standing ovation in this context. From here, transport changes. Trains can't go everywhere. Some camps are too remote, too inconvenient, so you walk, or you ride in open trucks, or sleds. The method matters less than the effect. Movement becomes labor. Every step costs calories you don't have. As you move deeper into the wilderness, the landscape empties out, villages disappear, roads thin into suggestions, trees crowd closer, dark and indifferent. This is deliberate. Gulag camps were often placed where escape was theoretically possible but practically suicidal. You could run, but where would you go? Nature becomes part of the security system. You start noticing the cold differently now. It's no longer just uncomfortable. It's strategic. Fingers stiffen, toes lose sensation. You wiggle them constantly. A small, repetitive motion that becomes oddly soothing. If modern wellness apps tracked this, they'd call it mindfulness. Here, it's just survival. Eventually, you see it. Fences. Watchtowers. Smoke rising thinly into the sky. The camp doesn't look dramatic. That's the most unsettling part. It looks functional, ordinary, like a factory that produces exhaustion instead of goods. As you approach, a strange thought crosses your mind: relief. At least the journey is ending. At least there will be routine. That thought is dangerous, but also very human. Historians still debate whether prisoners' initial relief upon arrival helped them psychologically or set them up for deeper disappointment later. You cross the threshold. The gate looms. Not grand, just inevitable. Behind you, the road disappears into white nothingness. Ahead of you, a system is waiting, one that has been refined, tested, and repeated thousands of times. And as you step inside, it becomes clear that the journey wasn't the hardship. It was the introduction. Crossing the gate doesn't feel dramatic. There's no clang that echoes symbolically. No cinematic pause where you realize everything has changed. Instead, the transition is almost bureaucratic. One step outside, one step inside, same cold air, same gray sky. Just a subtle shift in who owns your time now. You're told to stand still. You do. Standing becomes a recurring theme in your life from this point forward. You stand while guards argue. You stand while lists are checked. You stand while someone tries to fix a broken latch with numb fingers. The wind slides through your clothes like it knows you personally. It's not violent, just persistent, which somehow makes it worse. This intake process was standardized across many Gulag camps. A historical reality that doesn't get much attention because it's not visually dramatic. Yet this moment, arrival, was one nearly every survivor described in detail. The shaving of hair, the inventory of belongings, the casual confiscation of anything remotely personal. Watches disappear first. Time, after all, is no longer your responsibility. You're handed clothing that barely deserves the name. Layers exist, technically, but warmth is more of a suggestion. Boots are issued in a size that may or may not correspond to your feet. Socks are thin, sometimes mismatched. A lesser-known fact is that many prisoners stuffed rags, paper, even dried grass into their boots for insulation. Fashion dies quickly here, replaced by improvisation. Your name is taken from you gently, almost politely. You're assigned a number. It's written down, repeated aloud. You repeat it back, stumbling slightly. This isn't humiliation in the loud sense. It's erosion, a small but significant shift in how you think of yourself. Historians still debate whether this dehumanization was intentional policy or an emergent feature of mass incarceration. Either way, it works. You're shown the barracks, long wooden structures, low ceilings, rows of bunks stacked 3 high. The smell hits you first: wood, sweat, damp clothing, something sour that never quite leaves. You find a spot, or rather, a spot finds you. There's no choice involved. Someone gestures. You nod. Negotiations here are mostly nonverbal. The bunk is hard, uneven, and shared with splinters that feel aggressively curious about your skin. There's no mattress, just planks and maybe a thin layer of something that used to be straw. You sit. Lying down feels too vulnerable just yet. Around you, men move slowly, economically, like everything has been calibrated to conserve energy. This is your first lesson in camp culture. A guard explains the rules. Or maybe he doesn't explain so much as recite. Work quotas, wake up times, punishments for falling behind. The words blur together, but certain phrases stand out. Norm fulfillment, reduced rations, disciplinary measures. These aren't threats, they're forecasts. A common historical reality is that failing to meet work quotas often meant less food, which made future quotas harder to meet. It was a loop, and not the fun kind. You're given your first meal. Soup, technically, thin, hot, vaguely flavored. It's not enough, but it's something. You drink it slowly, both to savor it and to make it last. Someone nearby finishes too fast and stares at the empty bowl like it betrayed them. You look away. Sympathy is expensive. Night comes without ceremony. Lights dim but never fully go out. Someone snores. Someone mutters in their sleep. Someone cries quietly, the sound muffled by a sleeve. You lie down carefully, testing each movement like the floor might object. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache. Despite everything, sleep comes. Not deep, not kind, but present. Exhaustion is persuasive. As you drift, you realize something unsettling. Part of you is already adapting. The noise fades into background static. The cold becomes less shocking, more constant. Historians still argue whether this early adaptation was a survival advantage or the beginning of something harder to undo. Tomorrow, work begins. Real work. The kind that defines whether you eat, whether you rest, whether you last. You tell yourself you'll manage. You've handled worse, right? Missed deadlines, bad jobs, long days. The comparison feels comforting. It's also completely wrong. But for now, wrapped in rough fabric on a wooden plank, you let your eyes close. The camp breathes around you, quiet, patient, waiting. Morning doesn't arrive gently. It crashes into you like a concept you forgot to prepare for. A sharp sound, metal on metal. Or maybe a shouted command, cuts through whatever shallow sleep you managed to find. Your eyes open, but your body lags behind, confused about why it's being asked to exist again so soon. You sit up, slowly, because fast movements cost more than you can afford. Around you, others are already moving, swinging legs down from bunks with mechanical precision. No one stretches. No one yawns dramatically. Those habits belong to another life. Here, mornings are transactional. You wake because the system requires it. Roll call happens outside. Of course it does. You shuffle into the cold with the others. Boots crunching against frozen ground. The air is sharper than yesterday. Or maybe you're just noticing it more. Either way, it slides into your lungs and stays there, like it's considering moving in permanently. You line up by number now. That's the first thing you notice. You instinctively think of yourself as that number before your name even crosses your mind. It's subtle, almost polite, the way identity erodes here. No one shouts insults. No one needs to. The process does all the work. A guard walks the line, counting aloud. He miscounts, starts over. No one reacts. Mistakes happen, and reacting to them is rarely helpful. A lesser-known detail is that miscounts could delay breakfast, which in turn could delay work, which in turn could get everyone punished. So you stand very still, hoping math behaves itself today. Breakfast is another bowl of soup, thinner than last night's. If that's possible, you drink it anyway. Calories are calories. Historians often mention rations in numbers, grams of bread, liters of soup, but numbers don't capture the emotional weight of realizing this is all you get before a full day of labor. Modern nutritionists would call it inadequate. You call it your only option. Work assignments are announced. Forestry, mining, construction. You're sent where bodies are needed, not where skills might apply. Former professors cut trees. Former farmers dig frozen earth. A well-documented historical reality is that professional expertise rarely mattered in camp assignments. Efficiency was measured in output, not logic. You're handed tools that feel older than the camp itself. Heavy, worn smooth by other hands. The handle fits awkwardly, but you adjust. You always adjust. That's becoming another theme. The walk to the worksite is long. Snow crunches. Wind pushes. Someone stumbles and is yanked upright before they hit the ground fully. Falling costs time. Time costs food. Everyone understands this without it being said. The labor itself is relentless in its simplicity. Chop, lift, carry, repeat. There's no rhythm yet, just effort. Your muscles protest almost immediately. They're used to effort with purpose, chores, jobs, projects with endpoints. This has no visible end. Just quotas, numbers shouted over wind. A historically documented fact you'll learn quickly is that quotas were often unrealistic. Especially in winter, meeting them required strength you didn't have, calories you weren't given, and tools that barely cooperated. Historians still debate whether impossible quotas were deliberate punishment or systemic incompetence. Again, from inside it, the distinction feels irrelevant. You start to feel the cold differently now. It's no longer an external thing, it's inside you. Fingers numb, then ache, then go numb again. This cycle becomes familiar, like a very unpleasant metronome. You blow on your hands. Tuck them briefly under your armpits when you think no one's looking. Small rebellions. Someone nearby tells a quiet joke about gym memberships and outdoor workouts. It's not very funny, but you appreciate the effort. That's joke number 1 for this section. Humor here isn't about laughter. It's about reminding yourself you're still human. By midday, if it is midday, you're shaking. Not dramatically, just enough that your tool wobbles. A guard notices. You straighten up, force steadier movements. Weakness attracts attention, and attention is expensive. You think of modern office fatigue, of complaining about long meetings. The comparison feels absurd now, like remembering a dream someone else had. Lunch is more soup, slightly warmer this time, which feels like luxury. You drink it standing up. Steam fogging your vision. For a moment, warmth spreads through your chest. And you almost sigh. Almost. Work resumes. Your back screams quietly. Your hands feel detached, like they belong to someone else and you're borrowing them without permission. This is adaptation again, not graceful, but effective. As the light fades, exhaustion settles into your bones. You don't count hours anymore. You count repetitions. When the command to stop finally comes, it feels unreal, like a rumor confirmed too late. The walk back to camp is slower. Someone limps. Someone supports them briefly, then lets go. Kindness exists here, but it's rationed carefully. Historians still argue how solidarity survived under such pressure. You suspect it did, but in forms too subtle to romanticize. Back in the barracks, Dinner appears. Soup again. Bread. A small piece. You eat every crumb. You consider saving some. Then don't. Future hunger doesn't outweigh present certainty. As you lie back on the wooden plank, muscles buzzing, a strange thought surfaces. You survived the first day. That feels like an achievement. It shouldn't, but it does. You close your eyes, not because you're ready to sleep, but because opening them costs more than you have left. Tomorrow, you'll do it again. The second morning feels different. And that's how you know something's wrong. Your body wakes up before the noise does. As if it's learned the pattern and decided to get a head start on the suffering. Your eyes open to the same dim light, the same wooden ceiling, but the pain has multiplied overnight. Muscles you didn't know existed have filed formal complaints. You sit up carefully. Too fast and the world tilts. Too slow and you risk being noticed as sluggish. There's a narrow window where movement is acceptable. And you hit it by accident rather than skill. That's going to happen a lot here, success through coincidence. Outside, the cold is sharper. Or maybe you're weaker. It's hard to tell anymore. The line forms. Numbers are counted, recounted. Someone coughs again. The same deep cough from the train. Now a familiar character in your daily soundtrack. No one looks at him. Looking won't help. This is where the cold stops being weather and starts being an adversary. Siberian winters are famous in history books. Almost mythologized. What those books rarely mention is how the cold infiltrates routines. Metal tools steal heat from your hands instantly. Breath crystallizes in your scarf, forming a thin layer of ice that brushes your lips every time you inhale. It's intimate. This cold. It doesn't attack. It occupies. Work begins, and you realize yesterday was just an introduction. Your muscles are stiff, incooperative. Every movement feels like negotiating with a hostile committee. Chop, lift, carry. The rhythm is still there. But now it hurts sooner. You adjust your grip, your stance, your expectations. Lowering expectations is a survival skill here. A historical reality sets in quickly. Frostbite doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly. Numbing first, then burning later when it's already too late. You flex your fingers constantly. A nervous habit that doubles as self-preservation. Someone farther down the line isn't so lucky. A glove tears. He doesn't say anything. By the time anyone notices, his fingers are white and waxy. He's sent away, not home. Just away. Where exactly is unclear. Historians still debate survival rates after severe frostbite in the camps. Partly because records were inconsistent. Partly because outcomes weren't always recorded as causes. You keep working. Everyone does. The quota doesn't adjust for injuries. It barely adjusts for reality. At some point, snow starts falling. Light, almost pretty. If you're generous, it coats your shoulders, melts slightly from your body heat, then refreezes. Congratulations! You're now wearing a personalized ice jacket. This is joke number 1. By the way, though no one laughs, you think it anyway. Thinking jokes is cheaper than saying them. Your thoughts drift strangely during repetitive labor. You remember warm things, tea, kitchens, sunlight through windows. These memories feel indulgent, like mental desserts you're not sure you're allowed to have. Some prisoners avoided thinking about the past entirely. Others clung to it obsessively. Historians still argue which approach was healthier. From inside your own head. Both feel risky. Lunch arrives late, or early. Time is unreliable. The soup tastes the same. Which is to say, like hot water that once met vegetables socially. You drink it slowly, hands wrapped around the container. Stealing warmth more than nutrition. Someone jokes that it's chef's choice. That's joke number 2. It earns a single exhale through the nose from someone nearby. High praise. The afternoon drags. Your body moves on habit now. Not enthusiasm. You notice small efficiencies. How to swing the tool with less shoulder strain. How to shift weight to save your back. This is adaptation again, and it scares you a little. You're getting better at this. You're becoming compatible with the environment that's trying to erase you. By the time work ends, the light is already fading. The sky goes from gray to darker gray. Colors have left this place on principle. The walk back is quieter than yesterday. No jokes, less talking. Energy is being rationed more carefully now. In the barracks, you peel off layers. Steam rises briefly, then vanishes. Your clothes are stiff with frozen sweat. You hang them where you're told, hoping they'll be less wet by morning. Hope is also a resource. And like everything else here, it's limited. Dinner arrives. Soup, bread. The bread is slightly smaller than yesterday. Or maybe your hunger is larger. Hard to say. You eat it anyway. Every crumb, even the ones that fall onto your palm. Wasting food feels almost criminal now. Which is ironic, given the circumstances. As you lie down, your body hums with pain. A low, steady vibration. Sleep comes faster tonight, but it's heavier, less restful. Your dreams are shorter, choppier. You dream of standing still while the world moves past you. Just before you drift off, a thought settles in, not dramatic, just practical. If every day is like this, you start calculating how many days a body like yours can reasonably endure. The answer doesn't comfort you. But calculation, at least, means you're still thinking. And for now, that counts as surviving. Hunger stops being a sensation and starts being a condition. You don't wake up hungry anymore, you wake up as hunger. Like it's replaced one of your internal organs while you weren't looking. Your stomach doesn't growl, it just sits there, hollow and patient, waiting for you to disappoint it again. Breakfast confirms what you already know. The soup is thinner today. That might be imagination, but imagination has a way of becoming truth when it's repeated enough. Bread arrives in carefully measured portions, cut with a precision that feels almost sarcastic. You stare at your piece for half a second too long, then force yourself to look away. Staring doesn't make it bigger. Historically, rationing in the Gulag wasn't just about scarcity, it was a control mechanism. Food was tied directly to work output. Meet your quota, eat slightly more, miss it, eat less. This system had a name: norm-based rations. It sounds clinical, reasonable. What it actually meant was that the weakest prisoners received the least food. Ensuring they stayed weak. Historians still debate whether this was intentional cruelty or ideological blindness. Either way, the math never worked in your favor. You head out to work already tired. That's new. Yesterday, exhaustion arrived after labor. Now it's part of the starting conditions. Your body feels lighter in a way that's not pleasant, like it's slowly being hollowed out to save materials. By mid-morning, the hunger sharpens. It's not pain exactly. It's distraction. Your thoughts keep circling back to food. Uninvited, you find yourself imagining meals in absurd detail, textures, temperatures, the sound of cutlery. This is a known phenomenon among starving populations. Later studied and documented. Prisoners swapped recipes they'd never cook again. Debated the merits of imaginary soups. Your brain is coping the only way it knows how, by escaping sideways. Someone near you whispers about trading. Bread for favors, soup for labor. The camp economy exists parallel to the official one. Fragile and dangerous. A lesser-known fact is that informal trade networks were both a lifeline and a risk. Get caught hoarding or bartering, and punishment followed swiftly. But without trade, survival odds dropped. You listen, but don't participate yet. Observation is safer. Work feels slower today, not because you're moving less, but because time itself seems stretched thin. Each swing of the tool costs more. Your arms feel weak, but not in a dramatic way, more like the signal between brain and muscle is delayed. You compensate by using momentum, letting gravity do part of the work. It's efficient. It's also alarming how quickly you've learned this. Around you, men start making mistakes, small ones, missed strikes, dropped loads. No one comments. Mistakes are contagious, and attention is dangerous. A guard shouts anyway, voice sharp against the cold. You flinch, then immediately resent yourself for wasting the energy. Lunch arrives late, or early. You can't tell anymore. The soup is hot enough to steam, and that alone feels generous. You cradle the container like it's alive. Someone jokes that it's liquid motivation. That's joke number one. It gets a few quiet snorts. Humor is thinning, just like the soup. In the afternoon, hunger turns strange. It fades slightly, replaced by a dull fog. This is worse. Hunger you can negotiate with. Fog just steals things quietly. Focus, coordination, patience. Historians later noted that this stage often preceded collapse. From the inside, it feels almost peaceful, which is deeply unsettling. You think about stealing food. Just briefly, the thought slips in like a test. You don't act on it. Not because you're virtuous, but because you're tired and unsure you'd succeed. Morality here is less about right and wrong and more about risk assessment. By the time work ends, your legs feel unreliable, like they might renegotiate their contract at any moment. The walk back is slower again. Someone stumbles and doesn't get up right away. Two others lift him, not gently, not cruelly, just efficiently. This is what solidarity looks like when it's starving. Dinner is identical to breakfast, which is identical to lunch. You eat automatically now, without ceremony. Chewing feels optional. Calories are the goal. You lick your fingers without thinking. Then stop, slightly embarrassed, even though no one is watching. Old habits die hard. New ones replace them quickly. In the barracks, conversation turns to food stories. Childhood meals, regional dishes. Someone describes bread fresh from an oven. Steam rising, crust cracking. You close your eyes and imagine it. This is joke number 2. In a way, mental cuisine. It doesn't fill you, but it distracts you from the fact that nothing else will. As you lie down, hunger hums softly in the background, like a machine that never turns off. You adjust your position to ignore it. Sleep comes, but it's shallow, punctuated by half dreams where you're chewing endlessly and never swallowing. Before you drift off completely, you realize something unsettling. You're already planning tomorrow's energy use. Fewer movements, less talking, more efficiency. You're learning the rules. And the rules are teaching you how fragile survival really is. By now, your body has stopped asking permission. It simply moves when it must and protests quietly the rest of the time. The aches from earlier days haven't gone away, they've settled in. Unpacked their bags, and started rearranging the furniture. This is what chronic fatigue feels like when it becomes a personality trait. You wake before the sound again. That early alertness would have impressed productivity gurus back home. Here, it just means your body knows what's coming and would rather not be surprised. The air in the barracks feels heavier this morning, thick with the smell of damp clothing and unspoken resignation. Someone didn't make it back from work yesterday. There's no announcement. You just notice the empty space where a pair of boots should be. Roll call proceeds as usual. The number changes. No one reacts. This is one of those well-documented but rarely discussed realities of camp life. Absence becomes normalized with terrifying speed. Historians still debate whether this desensitization was psychological defense or slow moral erosion. Standing in line, you suspect it's both. Today's labor assignment shifts slightly. Same tools, same quotas, different patch of frozen ground. The walk is longer. Your legs register this as betrayal. You ignore them. Ignoring things is another skill you're developing. Work starts, and you discover something unsettling. You're better at it. Your movements are more economical. You waste less effort. You've learned where to place your feet so they don't slip. How to angle the tool to avoid jarring impacts. This should feel like progress. Instead, it feels like alignment with something you don't want to belong to. There's a historical irony here that scholars often point out. The Gulag relied on human adaptability to function. People learned to survive just well enough to keep working. Not thriving, not healing, just functioning. From the outside, it looked like resilience. From the inside, it felt like being slowly rewritten. Mid-morning, a guard inspects your line. His gaze lingers, measuring output against expectation. You straighten unconsciously. Push a little harder. That extra effort costs more than you want to admit. You'll pay for it later. You always do. This is joke number 1. By the way, the idea of later still existing in a place like this. The cold remains relentless, but you've learned to negotiate with it. You rotate fingers inside your gloves. Stamp your feet during brief pauses. You've also learned which movements draw attention and which pass unnoticed. Survival here isn't invisibility, it's blending. Looking neither strong nor weak. Neither defiant nor broken. Lunch arrives with a surprise. An extra scrap of something solid floating in the soup. A vegetable, maybe. The reaction is almost reverent. You eat it last, stretching the moment. A lesser-known fact is that prisoners often structured meals emotionally, saving the best bite for the end to create a sense of completion. You do the same now. Instinctively. The afternoon brings a different kind of exhaustion. Not sharp, not foggy, flat. Your emotions level out into something neutral and gray. Anger takes too much energy. Hope feels impractical. What remains is endurance, stripped of drama. Someone nearby hums quietly while working. Not a song, just a sound. No one tells him to stop. It's oddly comforting, like proof that small expressions of self still exist. Historians still argue how culture survived in the camps, through songs, jokes, rituals. Standing here, you realize survival culture didn't look like resistance. It looked like persistence. Near the end of the workday, you make a mistake, a small one. Your tool slips, costing you a few seconds. A guard notices. He doesn't shout. He just stares. The silence feels heavier than any insult. You correct immediately, heart pounding harder than the labor warrants. Attention fades. Crisis averted. You breathe again. The walk back is quiet. Snow crunches under boots in uneven rhythm. The sky is already dimming. Days feel shorter now, not because the sun is setting earlier, but because your awareness of time is shrinking. You think less about the future and more about the next immediate need: warmth, rest, food. Dinner is as expected. You eat without commentary. Someone nearby whispers a joke about opening a restaurant after all this. Specializing exclusively in soup. That's joke number 2. It earns a brief smile, which feels almost extravagant. As you settle onto your bunk, muscles throbbing dully, you realize something important. You no longer imagine escape. Not because it's impossible, but because imagining it costs energy you can't spare. Historians still debate when hope becomes a liability in extreme conditions. Lying here, you suspect the answer depends on how hungry you are. Sleep comes quickly, heavy and dreamless. That's new. No food dreams tonight, no memories intruding, just darkness and rest, however incomplete. Before drifting off entirely, a final thought flickers through your mind, not fear, not despair, just observation. You're still here. And in this place, that fact alone is starting to feel like an achievement. You begin to recognize people by habits instead of names. The way one man clears his throat before lifting. The way another always adjusts his cap twice before stepping off. Names belong to a softer world. Here, patterns are more reliable. Patterns don't disappear as easily. This is how community forms in the camp, not through introductions, but through repetition. You don't sit down and decide to bond. You simply keep ending up next to the same people, day after day, until their presence becomes part of the environment. Like the wind or the snow. Familiar, unavoidable. There's the older man with the permanently stooped back, who somehow never misses his quota. No one knows how. There's a former student who still mutters equations under his breath while working, as if numbers might protect him. And then there's you, slowly being filed into a shape that fits between them. Historically, Gulag populations were a strange mix: political prisoners, petty criminals, former officials, intellectuals, farmers, soldiers. This wasn't an accident. Mixing groups disrupted solidarity and kept everyone slightly off balance. What's less commonly mentioned is that despite this, informal alliances still formed. Humans are stubborn like that. You share information quietly. Which guard is strict but predictable? Which one is unpredictable and therefore dangerous? Which days the soup tends to be thinner? This knowledge is currency. You don't hoard it, you circulate it. Because tomorrow you might need something in return. A better spot in line. A warning glance. A brief cover while you catch your breath. Work continues. Always work. But your awareness stretches beyond your own pain now. You notice when someone's movements slow too much. You notice when someone stops joking entirely. These are signs, not dramatic ones, subtle indicators that someone is slipping toward the edge. A man near you drops his tool. Just once. It happens to everyone eventually. He bends to pick it up. Slower than he should. A guard's attention flickers in that direction. Before it can settle, someone else coughs loudly. Too loudly. The guard turns. Crisis diverted. No one acknowledges it afterward. Gratitude here is expressed through silence. This kind of quiet cooperation wasn't officially recorded, but it appears again and again in survivor accounts. Historians still debate how widespread it was, whether solidarity was the exception or the rule. From where you're standing, it feels situational. Help when you can. Don't draw lines you can't afford to defend. Hunger complicates everything. It sharpens tempers, shortens patience. Small disagreements flare up and then vanish just as quickly. There's no energy for grudges. You see two men argue over a scrap of bread. Voices low and tight. An hour later, they're working side by side again. The conflict already burned out by necessity. Lunch brings the usual thin soup. You drink it in small sips, spacing them out, pretending duration equals volume. Someone near you whispers a joke about slow dining. That's joke number one. It earns a faint smile before everyone looks away, as if smiling too long might be noticed. In the afternoon, the cold deepens. Wind cuts across the worksite, finding every gap in clothing. You instinctively shift closer to others. Not touching, just reducing exposed surface area. It's unspoken, coordinated, like birds on a wire. Minus the feathers and optimism. You catch yourself doing something new, adjusting your pace to match the group. Not too fast, not too slow. You move as part of a unit now. Because standing out in either direction invites scrutiny. Individualism is expensive here. Blending is efficient. As the day drags on, someone starts telling a story, quietly. In fragments. A memory from before. A river. Summer. The story isn't particularly interesting, but the cadence is soothing. It reminds you of podcasts you used to half listen to while doing chores. The comparison feels absurd and comforting at the same time. That's joke number two, though you don't laugh. When work finally ends, the walk back feels slightly different. Not easier. Exactly, just less lonely. You're surrounded by bodies moving at the same exhausted pace. Sharing the same goal. Reach the barracks. Sit down, eat, exist. Inside, space is tight, but familiar. You know where to sit now. Where to store your things. How to avoid stepping on someone's foot in the dark. These small competencies feel oddly satisfying. Progress, even here, releases a tiny spark of pride. You immediately suppress it. Pride attracts attention. Dinner passes quietly. Bread is divided. Someone tears his piece in half without thinking and hands part to another. The gesture is small, almost automatic. Later, you'll wonder if he even remembers doing it. As you lie down, listening to the layered sounds of breathing and coughing and shifting bodies, you realize something important. Survival here isn't a solo effort. Not entirely. You can't rely on others completely. But you can't ignore them either. You drift towards sleep with that thought lingering, not warm, not hopeful, just steady. In this place, steady is enough. For now. By now. You've learned that the most important rules in the camp are never written down. The official ones are posted somewhere: wake times, work quotas, punishments, but those are just the surface. The real rules circulate quietly, passed from person to person like contraband wisdom. Rule 1. Never be first. Not first in line, not first to volunteer, not first to complain. Being first attracts attention, and attention is rarely neutral. You position yourself somewhere in the middle, where mistakes blur into the crowd and effort looks acceptable but unremarkable. Rule 2. Never be last either. Falling behind marks you as weak. And weakness here isn't met with kindness, it's met with arithmetic. Fewer calories for fewer results. The logic is brutal, efficient, and self-reinforcing. Rule 3. Conserve everything. Energy, words, emotions. You stop reacting to things that would once have enraged or terrified you. A shouted insult? Not worth the calories. A threat? Already priced into the system. You file experiences away without fully processing them, like unopened mail you'll never get around to reading. These rules aren't announced. You absorb them by watching what happens to people who break them. Today, someone does. It's a small thing. He talks back, not loudly, not dramatically, just a moment of visible frustration. A comment that slips out before he can stop it. The guard doesn't react immediately. That's the part that makes everyone nervous. Delayed reactions are worse than instant ones. They give you time to imagine. Work continues. The man works harder than anyone. Overcorrecting, trying to erase the mistake. It doesn't help. At the end of the day, he's called out of line. No explanation. He doesn't resist. Resistance is also a rule violation. And everyone knows it. You don't see him that night. This kind of disappearance was common enough to become background noise, yet rare enough to remain terrifying. Disciplinary cells, punishment isolators, existed in most camps. Cold, dark, minimal rations. A few days inside could undo months of fragile adaptation. Historians still debate how often these punishments were used versus how often the threat alone was enough. Watching this unfold, you suspect the threat did most of the work. The next morning, everyone is quieter. Work feels heavier today, not physically, but mentally. You measure your own behavior constantly. How much effort is enough? How much silence is too much? You start editing yourself in real time, like an internal sensor with no off switch. It's exhausting in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Someone whispers a warning when a particular guard is in a bad mood. You adjust accordingly, lowering your head, tightening your movements. This is cooperation again, but it's conditional, fragile. Everyone helps until helping becomes dangerous. Lunch is uneventful. The soup tastes the same. You eat it the same way. Routine has taken over, and that's both a relief and a trap. Routine dulls fear, but it also dulls awareness. You have to stay alert without appearing alert, a balancing act that would be impressive if it weren't so miserable. In the afternoon, snow begins again, thick and wet this time. It clings to clothing, adds weight to every movement. Your shoulders ache under it. Someone mutters a joke about free resistance training. That's joke number 1. It dies quietly in the cold air. You think about rules from your old life, office policies, social norms, unspoken expectations. They seem almost playful by comparison. Here, Breaking a rule doesn't get you a warning or a meeting. It gets you erased from the group for a while. Or forever. The stakes are absolute. As the day ends, you pass the spot where the man stood yesterday. It looks the same. No marker. No sign. The absence feels louder than anything else. Historians still argue how prisoners processed these moments, whether they mourned privately or trained themselves not to notice. You do a bit of both without deciding to. Back in the barracks, conversation is minimal. Everyone is recalibrating. You eat, clean your bowl, settle into your place. Movements are careful, practiced. You've learned the choreography. Lying on your bunk, staring at the dark ceiling, you replay the day, not emotionally, strategically. What went wrong? What went unnoticed? What you'll do differently tomorrow? This kind of thinking would have bored you once. Now it feels necessary, almost comforting. Before sleep takes you, a quiet realization settles in. The camp doesn't just control your body. It's teaching you how to think in smaller, safer increments. You're still you, but you're learning how to disappear just enough to survive. Power in the camp doesn't always wear a uniform, but today you're reminded that it usually does. The guards rotate, shift changes sliding through the days like weather fronts, each bringing a slightly different climate. You've learned their rhythms now. Who counts carefully? Who rushes? Who enjoys the pause before a command just a little too much? This morning's guard is new to your line. Younger, less predictable. That alone tightens the air. Predictability, even when unpleasant, is safer than surprise. You stand a little straighter without meaning to. Muscles bracing like they've received a memo before your brain has. Historically, Gulag guards were a mixed group themselves: career officers, conscripts, men promoted too quickly or exiled upward into authority. One well-known reality is that some guards were former prisoners who'd accepted positions in exchange for better rations or lighter conditions. What's less commonly discussed is how that blurred line made everyone uneasy. When authority has recently been desperate, it tends to overcompensate. Work begins under closer observation. The guard walks the line slowly, boots crunching deliberately. He doesn't shout much. He doesn't need to. Silence stretches, heavy and expectant. You focus on your task, on keeping movements smooth and unremarkable. Being invisible is a skill now, and you're practicing it constantly. Mid-morning, there's an inspection. Tools are checked. Output is measured. A number is written down on a clipboard that looks far too clean for this environment. That clipboard holds more power over your dinner than anything else you'll see today. A lesser-known fact is that record-keeping in the Gulag was obsessively detailed in some areas and astonishingly careless in others. Your labor, however, is being documented with care. The guard stops near you, looks at your work. You hold your breath without realizing it. He nods once and moves on. Relief washes through you so strongly it's almost embarrassing. That's joke number one, by the way. Getting emotionally validated by a nod from someone holding a stick. Someone farther down the line isn't as lucky. His pace has slowed, just enough to register. The guard corrects him sharply. Words clipped and cold. No beating, no theatrics. Just a warning delivered with the promise of follow-through. The message ripples outward. Everyone adjusts. Just a fraction. Lunch arrives under supervision. You eat standing, eyes down. The soup is the same as ever. Today, You notice something odd. It tastes slightly better. That worries you. It might mean longer hours ahead, or higher expectations, or it might just mean your standards have fallen through the floor. Historians still debate how perception shifted under chronic deprivation, whether food improved or people simply forgot what good tasted like. In the afternoon, the guard's mood shifts. He jokes with another guard briefly. Laughter sharp and out of place. It's unsettling to see normal human behavior layered over this setting, like a sitcom laugh track dropped into a disaster movie. That's joke number 2, though again, it stays in your head. You realize something important. Guards are people too, with their own pressures, quotas, and fears. This doesn't make them sympathetic exactly, but it makes them variable. Variability is dangerous. A guard in a bad mood can ruin a day. A guard trying to impress a superior can ruin a week. Late in the workday, a supervisor arrives, higher rank, cleaner coat. Everyone straightens instinctively. This is a small, common event in Gulag life. Inspections from above, meant to ensure productivity and order. Historically, these visits often led to sudden changes, new quotas, reshuffled labor teams, unexpected punishments meant to demonstrate control. Historians still argue whether these inspections improved conditions or worsened them overall. Your experience suggests worsened is the safer assumption. The supervisor nods, says little, leaves. The damage is already done. Tomorrow's quota is raised. The announcement comes quietly, almost apologetically. A few more units per person. Not much. On paper. In reality, it's significant. You calculate automatically, extra effort. Same food. The math doesn't work, but the system doesn't care. The walk back to camp is tense. Conversation is muted. Everyone is doing the same calculations you are. Mentally rearranging tomorrow's energy budget. Someone mutters that at this rate, they'll be working for free. That's joke number 3. It earns a couple of breathy chuckles, which is basically a standing ovation here. In the barracks, you eat in near silence. The soup hasn't changed, despite the raised expectations. Of course it hasn't. You'd laugh if it didn't cost energy. You scrape the bowl carefully, as if thoroughness might be noticed by someone important somewhere. Old habits from another life resurface briefly, then fade. Lying down, you feel a familiar mix settle in, fatigue layered with alertness. Your body wants rest. Your mind wants to prepare. You think about the guard's nod, the supervisor's visit, the new quota. Power here isn't dramatic, it's incremental. It adjusts dials quietly and lets consequences unfold. As sleep approaches, one final thought drifts through you, not angry, not afraid, just clear. Survival here isn't about defying power. It's about learning how it moves, and staying just far enough ahead of its shadow. Illness doesn't arrive with urgency here. It seeps in, patient and unannounced, like cold through a cracked wall. You notice it first in the mornings, when your chest feels heavier than it should, when your breath doesn't quite sync with your movements. Nothing dramatic, just enough to slow you down half a step. Half a step matters. The cough returns, the same one you've heard for days now, but it's closer this time. You recognize the rhythm, someone you stand near, someone whose habits you've learned. He tries to muffle it, turns his head into his sleeve, times it between commands. You admire the effort. You also take a small step away when you can. Compassion has boundaries here, and one of them is airborne. Historically, disease was one of the most consistent killers in the Gulag system. Tuberculosis, dysentery, scurvy, names that sound old-fashioned until you're living inside their conditions. What's less commonly discussed is how normalized sickness became. Being ill wasn't a crisis. It was a stage. Historians still debate whether camps could have prevented outbreaks with better planning, or whether disease was an accepted byproduct of forced labor. Standing in the cold, coughing into your scarf, that debate feels abstract. Work begins, and you notice your stamina dipping earlier than usual. Your tool feels heavier. Your breath fogs faster. You pace yourself instinctively, shaving effort where you can, adding it back when a guard looks your way. It's exhausting to be sick quietly. Loud sickness gets noticed. Mid-morning, someone collapses. Not dramatically, no scream, no fall. He just sits down and doesn't get back up. For a moment, no one moves. Then a guard approaches. Annoyed more than concerned, the man is shaken, told to stand. He can't. Two others lift him under the arms. He sways, feet barely cooperating. He's sent away, not to rest, just away. The work resumes. This is a common historical scene, repeated in countless memoirs. What happened next depended on capacity, mood, and chance. Some sick prisoners were reassigned to lighter duties. Others were sent to infirmaries so overcrowded they functioned more like waiting rooms. Many never returned. Records, when they existed, were vague. Illness, weakness, failure to work. Lunch tastes worse today. Or maybe your appetite is finally losing the argument. You drink the soup anyway. Because not eating feels more dangerous than eating without wanting to. Someone jokes that it cures everything. That's joke number one. It lands poorly. Humor struggles when lungs are involved. In the afternoon, your cough starts. Just once at first. You stifle it quickly. Heart racing. You're suddenly very aware of your body in a new way. Like it's become unreliable equipment. You sip melted snow when you can. Careful not to be seen. Hydration is survival, even if the water tastes like iron and regret. You remember a strange historical detail you once read. How prisoners sometimes faked illness to escape hard labor, while others hid real illness to avoid punishment. The system made honesty impractical. Historians still argue how many deaths were caused not by disease itself, but by fear of revealing it. You understand that now, intimately. By the end of the workday, your chest aches, not sharply, dully, persistently. You measure breaths, unconsciously counting them like steps. The walk back is slower. You let others pass, then merge back into the group. Careful not to be last. Never last. In the barracks, the air is thick, too many bodies, too much damp fabric. You hang your clothes and notice how thin you've become. Your coat hangs differently now. You look away from your own reflection in a piece of metal that pretends to be a mirror. Dinner arrives. Soup, bread. You eat less enthusiastically than usual. Which worries you more than the cough? Hunger has always been there. Losing interest in food feels like crossing a line. You force yourself to finish. Every bite a small negotiation. As you lie down, the cough returns. Deeper this time. You turn your face toward the wall. Bury it in fabric. You don't want to be that sound. the sound others notice and file away mentally. Sleep comes in fragments. You dream of breathing underwater, of lungs that won't quite cooperate. You wake often, each time assessing, can I still work tomorrow? That's the real question, not am I sick, but can I hide it? Before dawn, you make a quiet decision. You'll push through, at least one more day. Everyone does. Historians still debate how much choice prisoners truly had in moments like this. Lying there, counting breaths, you feel the answer settle into your bones. Choice exists. It's just very, very small. Hope doesn't arrive like a sunrise here. It slips in sideways, disguised as rumor. You hear it first in fragments, half sentences passed between men who pretend they're talking about something else. A word like amnesty, a date that might matter, a name whispered with just enough confidence to feel dangerous. You don't ask questions. Asking questions marks you as interested, and interest can be mistaken for expectation. Expectation is risky. Still, the idea lodges itself somewhere behind your ribs and refuses to leave. Historically, rumors of release swept through the camps in waves. Some were tied to real events, anniversaries of the revolution, changes in leadership, the end of a war. Others were pure invention, born from desperation and recycled hope. Historians still debate how much these rumors helped prisoners endure and how much they broke them when nothing happened. From inside the camp, hope feels like a double-edged tool, useful, but easy to cut yourself with. Work continues, because work always does. Your cough lingers, quieter now, settled into something manageable. You've learned how to breathe shallowly, how to suppress the reflex before it announces itself. This is not healing, it's adaptation again, wearing a medical disguise. Mid-morning, someone leans toward you and murmurs that a group left last week. Released, or transferred, the distinction matters more than it should. Released means possibility. Transferred means more of the same. Just somewhere else with a different wind. You nod once. Non-committal. You've learned not to feed rumors with reaction. The cold today is gentler. Or maybe you're numb to it. Snow crunches underfoot in a familiar rhythm. You find yourself counting steps unconsciously, breaking the walk into manageable segments. Modern productivity experts would call this chunking. Here, it's just how you get from one end of the day to the other. Lunch tastes almost pleasant. That worries you. You suspect your standards have sunk so low they're underground. Someone jokes that the soup is improving. That's joke number one. It earns a couple of brief smiles before everyone remembers themselves. In the afternoon, the rumor grows legs. Someone claims to have seen paperwork. Someone else says a guard hinted at changes. None of this is verifiable. That's the point. Verification requires access. And access is precisely what you don't have. Historians still argue whether authorities allowed rumors to circulate deliberately, as a way to manage morale. Standing here, you can believe it. Hope keeps people working. You catch yourself imagining what release would feel like. The thought is vivid and treacherous. Warmth without earning it, silence without fear, food that doesn't need to be calculated. You shut it down quickly. Like closing a door before the cold rushes in. Daydreaming costs energy, and disappointment costs more. Work ends under a sky that almost shows color, faint blues. Pale pinks. You notice because it's rare. Because noticing feels like rebellion. For a moment, The camp looks almost peaceful. Like a photograph that's lying to you. Back in the barracks, the rumor is everywhere now. Buzzing softly like an insect you can't quite swat. Some men lean into it, speaking more than usual, eyes brighter. Others withdraw completely, staring at nothing, protecting themselves from the emotional investment. You sit somewhere in the middle, listening without committing. Dinner passes. Bread is torn carefully. Someone saves a piece, just in case. You consider doing the same. Then don't. Planning for a future you can't see feels arrogant. You eat. Lying on your bunk, you think about how strange it is that hope feels heavier than despair. Despair is honest. It tells you what to expect. Hope asks for faith, and faith has a poor track record here. Still, as sleep approaches, the rumor hums quietly in the background, persistent and warm in a way nothing else is. You don't believe it, but you don't entirely reject it either. Historians still debate whether hope was a survival tool or a liability in the Gulag. Drifting towards sleep, you realize the answer might depend on how carefully you hold it. Loose enough to breathe. Tight enough not to fall apart. Letters become a concept rather than an object. You hear the word now and then, mail, post, correspondence, spoken with the same tone people use for miracles or extinct animals. Something that used to exist. Something that might again, theoretically, under the right alignment of stars and paperwork. You don't remember the last time you held a piece of paper that wasn't a form or a ration slip. The idea of a letter, something written for you, not about you, feels almost intimate. Dangerous, even. Intimacy has sharp edges here. Historically, prisoners in the Gulag were allowed to send and receive letters. In theory, in practice, the system filtered, delayed, lost, and quietly erased most of them. Some camps allowed a few letters per year. Others allowed none. Censorship was absolute. Entire paragraphs vanished under black ink. Entire lives disappeared between envelopes. Historians still debate whether correspondence policies were meant to maintain a thin thread to the outside world or simply to control information flow. From where you're standing, it feels like neither. It feels arbitrary. Someone in the barracks claims he received a letter once. Years ago. He doesn't show it, there's nothing to show, but he describes the handwriting in detail. As if reciting it keeps the memory alive. The story draws a small, quiet crowd. You listen without interrupting, letting the image form in your mind. Paper, ink, familiar curves of letters. It's almost too much. Work pulls you back. As it always does. The routine hasn't changed, but you have. Your cough is quieter today. Settled into something you can manage. You've learned which breaths to suppress and which to release. Your body feels lighter again. And not in a good way. Hunger has eaten something permanent. Mid-morning, you notice a guard carrying a small stack of envelopes. The sight hits harder than cold ever did. A ripple passes through the line, tiny shifts in posture. Eyes lifting just a fraction too far. The guard reads a few names. Numbers. Technically. The rest of you hold still. Like movement might disqualify you retroactively. Your number isn't called. You're surprised by how quickly disappointment arrives. No build-up, no drama, just a small internal drop. Like missing a step you didn't know you were stepping toward. You recover quickly. Recovery is another skill you've learned. Those who are called step out of line. They return later. Faces carefully neutral. No one asks questions. Asking is rude here. You can't afford to want too much of someone else's good fortune. A lesser-known detail from memoirs is that receiving mail could be emotionally destabilizing. News of deaths, remarriages, children grown beyond recognition. Letters were not always gifts. Sometimes they were burdens. Lunch passes quietly. The soup tastes the same. You eat it the same way. Routine absorbs disappointment efficiently. In the afternoon, your thoughts keep circling back to the idea of being remembered. Not as a number, not as a labor unit, but as a person someone thought to write to. You wonder who would write you now, and what they would say. Would they still use your name, or would it feel unfamiliar in your ears? Historians still debate how prisoners maintained a sense of identity under prolonged isolation. Some clung to memory, others let it fade deliberately. To reduce pain, you find yourself doing both, depending on the hour. The day ends without incident. That, too, feels significant. You've learned to measure days not by what happens, but by what doesn't. Back in the barracks, someone quietly rereads a letter by dim light. Lips moving without sound. You look away, giving him the privacy you'd want if the roles were reversed. Privacy is another rare currency here, exchanged silently. As you lie down, the idea of letters lingers, not hope. Exactly, but connection, a reminder that somewhere beyond the fences, time is still moving differently. People are still writing, still expecting answers. You don't know if you'll ever be one of those answers. But for tonight, the thought that words can travel farther than bodies is enough to keep your mind gently occupied as sleep takes you. Not comforted, just less alone. Summer arrives without asking permission, and at first you almost don't recognize it. The cold loosens its grip slightly, like an enemy stepping back just far enough to make you nervous. Snow retreats into dirty patches. The air smells different, damp earth, wood, something almost alive. You hadn't realized how thoroughly winter had erased scent until now. This is the short season everyone talks about in fragments. The brief window when survival feels marginally less hostile. Historically, Siberian summers were infamous not for comfort, but for contrast. Warmth came with mud, insects, and new kinds of exhaustion. Still, after months of cold, even discomfort feels like a gift. Work doesn't ease up. If anything, it intensifies. Longer daylight means longer hours. Quotas rise quietly, justified by the idea that conditions have improved. The math changes, but the outcome doesn't. You work more for the same food. You just sweat while doing it now. Your body reacts strangely to warmth. Muscles loosen, then ache differently. Old injuries complain louder. You realize how much the cold had numbed you. Pain, it turns out, was just waiting patiently for summer. That's joke number one. By the way, the cold was doing you a favor. You don't laugh, but the thought flickers through your mind anyway. The barracks smell worse now. Damp wood and unwashed bodies mix with the heat. Windows open slightly, but not enough to help. Flies appear, bold and persistent. You wave them away half-heartedly. Then stop. Waving costs energy. Letting them land feels like surrender. But it's a cheaper one. A lesser-known historical detail is that summer illnesses often replaced winter ones. Dysentery spread easily when water sources warmed. Mosquitoes carried their own problems. The camp infirmary, such as it is, fills again. Historians still debate whether seasonal shifts truly changed mortality rates or simply changed causes. From where you stand, it feels like the camp always finds a way to rebalance suffering. Lunch tastes worse in the heat. Hot soup is less comforting when you're already sweating. You drink it anyway. Rules don't change just because the weather does. Someone jokes that they miss freezing. That's joke number 2. It earns a few tired nods. Missing winter feels like betrayal, but also honesty. In the afternoon, you notice color returning to the world. Greens along the tree line, brown earth underfoot. It's distracting. You have to remind yourself to watch your footing, to keep pace. Beauty is dangerous here. It invites reflection, and reflection invites comparison. You remember summers from before. Not vividly, more like impressions. Light through leaves. Warm evenings. The memory feels distant, like it belongs to someone you once met but don't know anymore. Historians still argue whether remembering the outside world helped prisoners endure or made the contrast unbearable. Today, it just feels unreal. The workday stretches long under the extended light. Time feels elastic, pulled thin, when the order to stop finally comes. It surprises you. You'd stopped expecting endings. The walk back is quieter than usual. People move slower in the heat, conserving strength. Someone collapses near the path, overwhelmed by dehydration and exhaustion. He's helped up, then helped along, not gently, not cruelly, just enough. Dinner arrives. Same food, same portions. The sameness feels more obvious now, highlighted by the changing world around it. You eat without thinking, sweat cooling on your skin as evening approaches. As you lie down, the light lingers through cracks in the barracks, refusing to fade completely. Sleep comes slower in summer. Your body isn't sure when to rest anymore. You listen to insects outside, a sound you'd forgotten existed. It almost feels normal. Almost. Before drifting off, a quiet realization settles in. Summer doesn't mean relief. It just means the camp has found a new way to keep going. And so have you. Punishment in the camp isn't always loud. Sometimes it arrives wrapped in procedure, delivered calmly, like an invoice for a debt you didn't know you'd incurred. You've learned to watch for the signs, the way a guard's tone flattens, the way your number is read twice instead of once. Repetition is never accidental here. Today, it happens to someone close enough that you feel it like a temperature drop. He's not dramatic. He's not defiant. He's just behind. The new quota, the heat, the accumulated hunger. Something finally slips. It's a small slip, too small to matter in a reasonable system. This isn't one. He's pulled from the line at the end of the day. Not roughly, not kindly, efficiently. Everyone else keeps their eyes forward. Because looking doesn't help and can hurt. You feel the absence immediately. Like a tooth your tongue keeps returning to. The space where he stood feels wrong. Disciplinary punishment in the Gulag was formalized but unevenly applied. Isolation cells, often called punishment cells, were cold, dark, and deliberately minimal. Food was reduced. Time blurred. A few days inside could undo months of careful adaptation. Historians still debate whether these punishments were meant to correct behavior or simply demonstrate control. Watching this unfold, the demonstration part seems obvious. The next morning, his bunk is empty. No explanation, no announcement. Absence becomes a lesson for everyone else. You move more carefully, measure your effort even more precisely. The rules haven't changed, but the consequences feel closer now. Work proceeds under heightened tension. Everyone is sharper, quieter. Movements are crisp, almost exaggerated in their correctness. You find yourself double-checking everything: your grip, your pace, your posture. It's exhausting, this constant self-surveillance. It feels like performing for an audience that doesn't care about the performance. Only the numbers. Midday, the man returns. He's thinner, somehow, or maybe just smaller. His eyes don't quite focus the same way. He rejoins the line without comment. No one asks where he's been. Asking would be a mistake. You exchange a glance, brief, neutral. He gives the slightest nod. It's not gratitude. It's acknowledgement. That's all that's allowed. This is another lesser-known reality of camp life. Punishment wasn't always about removal. Sometimes it was about return. Sending someone back changed, quieter, visibly diminished. A living example. Historians still debate which was more effective, fear of punishment or the sight of its aftermath. You suspect the latter lingers longer. Lunch tastes like nothing today. You eat anyway. Hunger doesn't take days off. Someone makes a joke about timeout rooms. That's joke number one, and it lands awkwardly. Humor doesn't always survive contact with reality. The afternoon drags. Heat presses down. Sweat stings your eyes. You feel the strain building in your body. The careful balance between effort and collapse narrowing. You slow slightly, then correct, then slow again. It's like walking a line drawn in chalk on uneven ground. As the day ends, the man moves stiffly, favoring one side. You notice, then deliberately stop noticing. Empathy here has limits. Too much of it can pull you under with someone else. Back in the barracks, the mood is subdued. No stories, no jokes. Everyone eats quickly, quietly. The punishment has done its work. Order restored, at least on the surface. Lying on your bunk, you think about how correction works in this place. It doesn't teach you how to do better. It teaches you how to be smaller, how to take up less space. Mentally and physically, how to exist without drawing attention. Historians still debate whether such systems produce obedience or simply exhaustion. As sleep edges in, you realize the distinction might not matter. The outcome looks the same from the inside. You close your eyes, muscles humming softly with fatigue. Tomorrow, you'll work a little harder. Not because you want to, but because you've seen what happens when you don't. By now, survival has its own culture. Quiet and improvised, passed along the way old habits once were. No one announces it, no one writes it down. You absorb it by watching what works and what gets people noticed. Removed, or quietly erased. You've learned how to tie your boots so circulation lasts longer. How to fold clothing at night so it traps a little warmth by morning. How to position yourself in line so the wind hits someone else first. None of this feels clever. It feels necessary. These aren't tricks. They're adjustments, like turning down the volume on pain. Historically, these micro-strategies appear again and again in survivor accounts. Small hacks that made the difference between lasting weeks and lasting months. What's less discussed is how quickly they become routine. How survival knowledge replaces everything else you used to know. Historians still debate whether this adaptation represented resilience or quiet defeat. From inside it, the question feels irrelevant. You adapt or you disappear. Work continues, but it feels slightly different today. Not easier, never easier, but smoother. Your body moves with practiced efficiency. You know when to push and when to coast. You've learned the exact pace that keeps guards uninterested and your muscles just functional enough. It's a narrow band, but you live in it now. Mid-morning, someone shares a tip in a whisper. How to save a mouthful of soup by tilting the bowl just right. How to dry socks near your body heat without soaking your shirt. These exchanges are brief, almost secretive. Knowledge is valuable, but broadcasting it can attract attention. You take the tip, store it away, and pass on a different one later. This is trade, too, just not the kind that gets punished. Lunch arrives, and you perform the ritual automatically. Soup first, bread last. You break the bread into smaller pieces, spacing them out to extend the experience. This is a common survival behavior in starvation conditions. Later studied and documented. At the time, it just feels intuitive. You don't want the meal to end too quickly. Endings are uncomfortable. Someone jokes that they're becoming experts in advanced soup management. That's joke number 1. It earns a few silent smiles. Humor here has evolved. It's not about laughter anymore. It's about recognition. The afternoon brings heat again. Heavy and dull. Flies buzz lazily, unafraid. You don't bother swatting them now. You've learned they'll just come back. Some battles aren't worth fighting. That lesson extends far beyond insects. You notice how people carry themselves differently now. Less anger, less visible fear, not because things have improved, but because emotional expression costs too much. This flattening of affect was noted by later psychologists studying long-term camp survivors. Historians still debate whether it was a protective numbness or a lasting injury. Standing here, you feel it as both. A guard passes, barely glancing your way. That feels like success. You keep working, steady and quiet. Your cough stays under control today. Tucked away where it can't cause trouble. You're not well, exactly, but you're functional. And that's the currency that matters. Toward the end of the day, you help someone adjust a load. Just a little, just enough. No thanks or exchange. None are needed. This is how cooperation works now, brief. Efficient. Deniable if necessary. Kindness without witnesses. Back in the barracks, the routines continue. Clothes hung, bowls cleaned, bodies arranged carefully on bunks. You've learned how to lie so your joints hurt less in the morning. It doesn't eliminate pain, it just delays it. As you settle in, you realize something quietly unsettling. This life has its own normal now. You know what to expect, how to behave, how to last another day. The shock is gone, the outrage too. What remains is familiarity. Historians still argue whether normalization was the system's greatest weapon. Lying here, listening to the familiar sounds of breathing and shifting bodies. You suspect it was. When suffering becomes routine, it stops demanding explanation. Before sleep takes you, a final thought drifts through your mind, not despairing, not angry, just practical. You're no longer trying to survive the camp. You're surviving in it. Fear doesn't always announce itself with panic. Sometimes it settles in quietly. wearing the voice of speculation. You hear it at night, in the pauses between breaths, in the half-whispered conversations that pretend not to be about anything important. Someone mentions a transfer. Someone else mentions a name that isn't supposed to be mentioned. The words float, land, and then spread. Rumors thrive here because certainty is rare. And when certainty does appear, it's usually bad news. You learn to listen without reacting, to let information pass through you like wind through branches. Catching too much of it can weigh you down. Ignoring all of it can leave you unprepared. This balance, between awareness and insulation, becomes another daily task. Historically, Gulag camps were fertile ground for rumors. Leadership changes in Moscow, shifts in policy, wars ending or beginning. Any distant event could ripple through the camps as whispered possibility. Most of these whispers were wrong. Some were half-right in dangerous ways. Historians still debate whether rumor acted as psychological relief or psychological torture. Lying on your bunk, staring at the ceiling, you suspect it managed to be both. Work feels tenser today, not because anything has changed, but because everyone is listening more closely. You catch yourself scanning faces, noting who looks anxious, who looks withdrawn. A man you haven't seen in days reappears, thinner and quieter than before. No explanation follows him. Explanations are optional here. Mid-morning, someone claims there will be inspections. Full inspections. Another says that's nonsense, that the guards are just rotating. A third insists he heard it from someone who heard it from a clerk. The chain of information is flimsy, but the effect is real. Shoulders stiffen, movements sharpen. Fear doesn't need facts to function. Lunch is quieter than usual. The soup tastes the same, but you drink it faster. Distracted, someone jokes about surprise guests. That's joke number one, and it lands awkwardly. No one wants to imagine visitors right now, especially the kind who carry clipboards. In the afternoon, the rumor shifts. Now it's about punishment, about lists, about names. You notice how quickly people start rehearsing their own innocence, mentally reviewing every small mistake from the past week. You do the same. This kind of fear doesn't paralyze, it mobilizes. It keeps you alert, careful, exhausted. A guard passes with a folded paper. You watch it until it disappears. It could be nothing. It could be everything. Historians still debate how much of this fear was induced intentionally and how much was a side effect of opacity. Standing here, heart rate slightly elevated for no clear reason. The intention feels secondary to the outcome. Work ends without incident. That should be a relief. Instead, it makes the rumors feel unfinished, like a story that stopped mid-sentence. You walk back with the others. Conversation minimal. Everyone is conserving something, energy, hope, composure. In the barracks, tension hums softly. People speak in low tones or not at all. Someone stares at the door longer than necessary. Someone else rearranges his belongings repeatedly, as if preparing for movement. You sit still, hands folded, doing nothing on purpose. Stillness can be a shield. As you lie down, the whispers continue, quieter now, filtered through exhaustion. You let them wash over you without anchoring. You've learned that fear here feeds on certainty. If you don't give it that, it weakens slightly. Before sleep arrives, you take inventory, not of rumors, but of facts. You're here. You ate. You worked. You weren't singled out today. These small certainties are enough to anchor you. For now. Historians still argue whether constant low-level fear was more damaging than overt violence. Drifting towards sleep, you think the answer might be yes. Fear that never resolves doesn't burn out. It just teaches you how to live beside it. Stories start surfacing when the days blur too much. Not the big stories you'd expect, no grand speeches. No heroic arcs, but fragments. Half-remembered lives passed from bunk to bunk like contraband. You listen because listening costs less energy than speaking. And because these stories do something important. They remind you that people existed before they became numbers. One night, someone mentions a man who used to teach philosophy. Another talks about a woman who translated poetry in a different camp. Reciting lines from memory when there was nothing else to trade. These aren't official histories. They don't make it into archives. They survive only if someone remembers to repeat them. Tonight, you're one of the someones. Historically, the Gulag held a staggering range of people, writers, scientists, engineers, musicians, many of whom vanished from public record while still alive. What's less commonly discussed is how their identities persisted quietly inside the camps. Knowledge was shared in whispers. Lessons were taught without classrooms. A former doctor might advise on wounds. A former accountant might help someone calculate rations. Historians still debate how much intellectual life survived behind the wire. From where you're sitting, it survives in scraps. Work continues the next day. As always, but your attention drifts differently now. You start wondering who the people around you used to be. What skills they're not using. What names they haven't heard spoken aloud in years. It's a dangerous line of thought. You know that, but it's also grounding. It adds depth to a world that otherwise feels flat and repetitive. Mid-morning, someone tells a quiet story while working. Not a performance, just a low, steady voice describing a childhood river. The way ice broke in spring. You focus on the rhythm more than the content. The story doesn't change your situation. But it changes the texture of the hour. That matters. Lunch arrives. Soup, bread, routine. You eat while replaying fragments of the story in your mind, adjusting details unconsciously, like a memory that's already becoming yours. This is how stories survive here, through mutation. Accuracy matters less than continuity. In the afternoon, the guard presence feels lighter. Or maybe you're just less reactive to it. You've learned to store thoughts for later. To open them only when it's safe. Memory becomes a private room you visit at night. Carefully. Briefly. Back in the barracks, someone asks you quietly if you remember a certain song. You do, or at least you think you do. You hum a few notes under your breath. Unsure if they're correct. It doesn't matter. The sound itself is the point. Another man nods, eyes closed, as if the tune unlocked something he thought was gone. These moments are small and easily dismissed. But they matter more than they should. Historians still debate whether preserving identity in such conditions was a form of resistance or simply a coping mechanism. Lying there, listening to the echo of a half-remembered melody. You suspect it's both. Sleep comes slowly. Your body is tired, but your mind lingers on the idea that every person here is a story interrupted. Not ended. That thought doesn't comfort you exactly. But it steadies something inside. Tomorrow will be the same. But tonight, for a few quiet minutes, the camp feels slightly less empty. And that, somehow, makes it easier to close your eyes. Time stops behaving the way you remember it. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just gradually. Like a clock losing minutes each day until one afternoon you realize you have no idea what hour it is. Or why that used to matter. You still wake, you still work, you still eat. Those things happen with mechanical reliability. What's gone is the sense of sequence. Yesterday feels identical to today. And tomorrow is already tired before it arrives. Days stack on top of each other like identical crates. Unlabeled and heavy. This loss of temporal clarity was one of the most commonly reported experiences among long-term prisoners. Calendars were rare. Dates were irrelevant. Even seasons blurred if you weren't careful. Historians still debate whether this distortion of time was a psychological injury or an adaptive response. Standing in line at dawn, or what you assume is dawn, you suspect it's both. When the future offers nothing concrete, the mind stops reaching for it. Work feels automatic now. Your body moves before thought catches up. You no longer count hours. You count tasks completed, tools returned, steps back to the barracks. The quota is met or it isn't. Food arrives or it doesn't. These are the only markers that still register. At some point during the morning, you realize you can't remember how long you've been here. Weeks? Months? Longer? The question floats up briefly. Then sinks. Knowing wouldn't change anything. That's a strange relief. Ignorance becomes a form of insulation. Lunch comes and goes without ceremony. You drink the soup while staring at nothing in particular. Someone nearby mutters a joke about time flying. That's joke number one, and it earns exactly one dry breath of amusement before disappearing. Humor about time feels risky. Like tempting fate. In the afternoon, you catch yourself forgetting things that used to feel essential. The layout of your old home. The sound of a specific voice. Details fade first, then edges, then entire images soften into impressions. This isn't deliberate, it's just what happens when memory isn't reinforced. Historians still argue whether forgetting was a betrayal of the past or a necessary adaptation. From inside your own head, it feels more like gravity than choice. You remember the camp clearly. Every board in the barracks. Every turn in the path to the worksite. Every face. Every habit. New information pushes old information out. The present is crowded. The past has nowhere to sit. Back in the barracks that evening, someone tries to calculate how long they've been inside. He counts backwards through events: winter, summer, the rumor, the inspection. He stops, confused. The calculation collapses. No one helps, not because they're unkind, but because they don't trust their own timelines either. You lie down, staring at the ceiling, and try to anchor yourself to something concrete. A number, a date, anything. Your mind slides off it like ice. Eventually, you stop trying. Letting go feels easier than holding on. Before sleep, a thought arrives, not frightening, just oddly neutral. If time doesn't move forward anymore, then neither do you. And in a place like this, being still can feel dangerously close to being safe. You close your eyes, not knowing if it's early or late, not caring as much as you once would have. Tomorrow will come. It always does. You just won't be able to tell when it starts. Death doesn't shock you anymore. That realization arrives quietly, without ceremony. and it unsettles you more than the deaths themselves. You notice it one morning when someone doesn't stand up at roll call and your first reaction isn't horror, it's calculation. A number is missing. Will they recount? Will breakfast be delayed? This isn't cruelty. It's conditioning. In the early days, the idea of someone dying near you would have hijacked your thoughts for hours. Now it registers like a weather change. Unpleasant, not unexpected. The camp has trained you to process loss the way it processes everything else, quickly, efficiently, without emotion that might interfere with the schedule. Historically, mortality in the Gulag varied wildly by camp, year, and season. Some years were catastrophically worse than others, especially during famine or intensified labor drives. What's less commonly discussed is how prisoners adapted psychologically to constant death. Not by becoming heartless, but by narrowing their emotional bandwidth. Historians still debate whether this numbness protected people or hollowed them out permanently. Standing in line, waiting for a count to finish. You feel it doing both. Work proceeds as usual. The absence of one body means more work for the rest. The system absorbs loss seamlessly. You notice how tools are redistributed, how positions shift without comment. Efficiency resumes. That's the most unsettling part. How easily the day adjusts. Mid-morning, someone collapses again. This time, he doesn't sit up afterward. The response is quick and practiced. Guards intervene. Orders are given. The rest of you are told to keep working. You do. Your hands move while your mind lags behind, catching up slowly. Later, you'll realize this was self-preservation. Stopping wouldn't have helped him. It might have harmed you. Lunch tastes metallic today, or maybe that's just your mouth. You eat anyway. Someone makes a quiet joke about taking a day off. That's joke number one, and it lands with a thud. Humor sometimes misfires here. No one reacts. The silence itself feels like a correction. In the afternoon, you notice how people avoid the spot where it happened. Not consciously, just a subtle shift in footpaths. A widening of space. Avoidance becomes a language of respect and fear. The ground holds memory even when people don't want to. Back in the barracks, the bunk remains empty. No one moves into it right away. Space is valuable, but timing matters. Taking it too soon feels wrong. Later, someone will. That's how this works. Life continues, awkwardly stepping around absence until it forgets where the gap was. As night settles, you reflect, not emotionally, but observationally. Death here isn't dramatic. It doesn't arrive with speeches or last words. It's quiet, administrative, sometimes barely noticed. That's what makes it dangerous. It teaches you that survival isn't heroic, it's statistical. Historians still argue whether witnessing so much death increased prisoners' will to survive or diminished it. Lying on your bunk, staring into the dark, you realize the answer changes day by day. Some mornings, it hardens you. Others, it drains something essential. Tonight, it leaves you with a single, sobering understanding. You don't measure survival by years anymore. You measure it by whether you're still standing when your number is called. And tomorrow morning, you intend to be. Adaptation completes its quiet work on you without asking permission. One day, you realize you're no longer reacting to the camp, you're anticipating it. Your body wakes moments before the noise. Your hands reach for tools with familiar weight. Your feet find their place in line without looking. The system doesn't have to push anymore. You're already moving. This is the phase no one warns you about. Because from the outside it looks like success. You're still here. You're functioning. You meet quotas often enough to avoid attention. You eat. You sleep. In another context, this would be called resilience. Here, it feels more like surrender wearing practical shoes. Historically, many long-term prisoners described this stage with unease. Not the hunger or the cold. That part was expected. But the way the camp's logic seeped into their thinking. They began optimizing themselves for survival inside the system rather than imagining anything beyond it. Historians still debate whether this adaptation increased survival rates or simply prolonged exposure to harm. Standing in the line, adjusting your stance to save your knees. You don't debate it, you just do it. Work feels almost automatic now. You've learned the efficient arc of motion that spares your shoulders. You've learned when to pause just long enough to breathe without appearing slow. You've learned how to look busy even when your body is negotiating terms. These skills feel earned. They're also unsettling. You didn't study for them. You absorbed them by necessity. Mid-morning, you notice something else. Emotions arrive muted. Anger flickers and fades. Fear registers as information rather than panic. Even hunger feels familiar, like a chronic condition you manage rather than an emergency you fight. This flattening is subtle, but it's real. Psychologists later called it emotional blunting. Historians still argue whether it was reversible. From inside it, you can't tell where it begins or ends. Lunch comes and goes. You eat with methodical precision, breaking bread into equal parts, spacing bites. Someone jokes about professional surviving. That's joke number one. It earns a brief nod. The idea isn't funny. Exactly, it's accurate. In the afternoon, you catch yourself advising someone newer, quieter than you used to be. A small tip about foot placement. A warning glance when a guard passes. You don't think of it as leadership. You think of it as maintenance. The camp produces knowledge, and knowledge circulates. Back in the barracks, routines unfold smoothly. Fewer mistakes, less noise. Everyone knows what to do. This efficiency would be impressive if it weren't built on deprivation. You settle onto your bunk with practiced care, arranging your body to minimize pain tomorrow. You don't even think about it anymore. Your muscles remember for you. As you lie there, a strange thought surfaces, not fear, not despair, but something like loss. You realize you've become good at this. Not brave, not strong, just good at enduring, and you're not sure what that means for the person you were before. Historians still debate whether such adaptation represented the human spirit's triumph or its compromise. Staring into the dim light, you suspect it's both. Survival here demands flexibility, and flexibility leaves marks. Before sleep takes you, you make a small promise to yourself, not dramatic, not hopeful, just quiet. You'll remember that this isn't who you are. It's who you've learned to be. For now, the smallest mistakes are the most dangerous now. Not the obvious ones, the dramatic failures that draw attention immediately, but the quiet slips that look harmless until they aren't. You've learned this the hard way, by watching what happens when routine breaks its own rhythm. It starts with something trivial. A lace tied too loosely. A tool picked up half a second late. A glance held just a fraction too long. None of these matter in a reasonable world. Here, they stack. They accumulate interest, and eventually, someone notices. Today, it isn't you, but it's close enough that you feel the lesson settle into your muscles. A man in your line miscounts his output. Not deliberately, just fatigue doing what fatigue does. The numbers don't add up. The guard checks again. The pause stretches. You feel the air tighten, like a room holding its breath. The correction is swift. No shouting, no spectacle, just a sharp instruction and a mark on a clipboard. That mark means reduced rations. Reduced rations mean weaker performance tomorrow. Tomorrow's weakness means more marks. It's a feedback loop so elegant it almost feels designed. Historians still debate whether these cascading failures were intentional or simply an accepted byproduct of the system. From where you stand, it looks very intentional. You work harder than necessary for the rest of the morning. Not because it helps, but because fear leaks sideways. Someone else's mistake always feels like a warning addressed to you personally. Your shoulders tighten, your breath shortens. You slow yourself deliberately, correcting the overcorrection. Too much effort looks suspicious too. Lunch arrives, and you notice the reduced portion immediately. Not yours, his. The difference is small, but visible. You look away. Watching feels like tempting fate. Someone mutters a joke about diet plans. That's joke number one, and it dies instantly, smothered by the reality sitting in that thinner bowl. In the afternoon, the man's movements change. He's slower already, though he tries not to be. Hunger accelerates everything. Weakness compounds. You can almost see the future playing out. Step by step. This is another lesser-known truth of camp life. Collapse often began days before anyone fell. Historians still argue how many deaths were preventable if the system had allowed recovery instead of punishment. Watching him work, you know the answer isn't comforting. You become hyper-aware of your own body. How steady your hands feel. How evenly you're breathing. You double-check everything without appearing to. This vigilance is exhausting, but you don't know how to turn it off. Mistakes here aren't educational. They're cumulative. The day drags. Heat presses down. Sweat stings your eyes. You blink it away carefully. Wiping your face too often might look like fatigue. Everything is performance now, even suffering. When work ends, the man makes it back. Barely. No one congratulates him. Survival isn't celebrated here, it's expected. Back in the barracks, he eats silently, slower than usual, savoring each bite because there are fewer of them. You don't offer anything. Not because you don't care, but because helping could mark both of you. Kindness has rules too. As you lie down, you replay the day, searching for your own near misses. The moment you almost stumbled. The time you almost coughed. The split second you almost stopped paying attention. You catalog them carefully, like hazards on a map you'll need tomorrow. Historians still debate whether the Gulag destroyed people through brutality or through accumulation, small pressures applied relentlessly until something gave. Lying there, muscles aching softly, you suspect it was the latter. Not the blow, but the drip. You close your eyes with a quiet resolve, not heroic, not hopeful. Tomorrow, you'll be careful. Careful enough to survive another day. And in this place, that's the closest thing to victory you're allowed. Memories start arriving uninvited, usually when you're least prepared to deal with them. Not the dramatic ones, no sweeping scenes or emotional monologues, but small, Stubborn details that slip past your defenses. The weight of a mug in your hand. The sound of a door closing somewhere warm. The exact shade of light on a wall in late afternoon. They come while you're working. When your body is busy enough that your mind wanders without permission. You don't fight them at first. Fighting costs energy. And these memories feel harmless. Almost helpful. They remind you that another world existed. That you existed in it. But they don't stay gentle for long. They start to compare. And comparison is dangerous. Historically, many prisoners described memory as both refuge and torment. Remembering could preserve identity. It could also sharpen loss until it cut too deeply. Historians still debate whether deliberate forgetting was a form of self-protection or surrender. Standing in the dirt, lifting the same weight for the 100th time. You feel both impulses pulling at you. Today, it's your old routine that surfaces. Morning habits. The way you used to complain about being tired while still having the option to rest. The absurdity of those complaints hits you now. Sharp and almost funny. That's joke number 1. Your past self whining about things that feel luxurious in retrospect. You almost smile, then stop. Smiling for no reason feels suspicious. Work continues. Steady and heavy. You let your body take over. Using the familiar rhythm to keep the memories from growing too loud. But they persist, slipping in between movements. A face you haven't pictured in months. A voice you're not sure you'd recognize anymore. You wonder, briefly, whether those people would recognize you. Lunch interrupts the spiral. Soup, bread, the usual. You eat mechanically, grounding yourself in the immediate. Taste, texture, warmth. The present is safer when it's concrete. In the afternoon, the memories change. They're less detailed now, more impressionistic. Colors instead of faces, feelings instead of events. It's like watching an old photograph fade. Edges softening first. You don't know if this is time or adaptation doing the work. Probably both. A man nearby hums again today. The same tuneless sound you've heard before. It anchors you. Sound exists now. That's enough. As the day ends, you feel oddly drained, not physically, but mentally. Memory has weight, and you've been carrying it without realizing. On the walk back, you keep your eyes on the ground, watching your steps, letting the world narrow. Narrow is manageable. In the barracks, someone asks you quietly what you used to do. It's a simple question, asked without expectation. You hesitate. The answer feels larger than it should. You give a short version. Vague, safe. He nods, accepts it without probing. This is how past lives are shared here, in fragments small enough not to hurt. Lying on your bunk, the memories settle again, quieter now. You let them drift, neither clinging nor pushing away. Historians still argue whether memory kept prisoners human or kept them suffering. Tonight, you suspect the answer depends on distance. Too close, and it burns. Too far, and you forget who you're trying to save. As sleep approaches, you make a quiet adjustment. You don't try to remember everything anymore. You focus on remembering that there was something. A life, a self, a world that didn't require constant calculation. That's enough for now. You close your eyes, letting the past blur gently at the edges. Not gone, just softened, like a photograph folded and kept in a pocket you don't open every day. Tomorrow, you'll need your energy elsewhere. The idea of release drifts through the camp like fog, never solid, never quite gone. You hear it in the way people talk about the future now. Cautiously, indirectly, not when but if, not where but what then. Freedom here isn't a destination. It's a concept that's been handled so often it's lost its edges. You overhear someone say their sentence is nearly complete. The phrase lands strangely. Complete implies closure, like a project finished or a box checked. You try to imagine what completion looks like in a place designed to feel endless. The image doesn't form cleanly. Historically, sentences in the Gulag were elastic. 5 years could become 10. 10 could become, until further notice. Some prisoners were released only to be rearrested months later. Others were technically free but unable to leave the region, trapped by geography and stigma. Historians still debate how many releases were genuine versus administrative reshuffling. Standing here, the difference feels academic. Work continues, as always, but there's a subtle shift in tone. A few men carry themselves differently, slightly straighter, slightly more guarded. They've heard something, or they believe they have. Belief alone can change posture. You notice, then look away. Hope is contagious, but so is disappointment. Lunch arrives. Soup, bread, routine. You eat without thinking, but your mind drifts anyway. You wonder what it would feel like to stop calculating portions. To eat until full, then stop because you're satisfied. Not because the food is gone. The thought feels indulgent, almost rude. You let it pass. In the afternoon, a guard reads out a short list. Numbers, not names. A few men step forward. There's no announcement of where they're going. Transfer? Release? Punishment? The ambiguity is deliberate. Everyone else watches carefully, memorizing the posture, the expressions, the way they're escorted. You search their faces for clues and find none. They've learned, too. The rest of you return to work. The system doesn't pause for possibility. It never has. Back in the barracks, the mood is unsettled, quiet, but alert. Someone speculates in a whisper. Someone else shuts it down immediately. Talking about release is risky. It sharpens longing. And longing can undo months of careful numbness. You lie on your bunk and consider the idea of leaving. Not emotionally, strategically. What would your body do without routine? Without quotas? Without the constant hum of survival? The thought is unsettling. Structure, even cruel structure, has become familiar. Historians still debate whether long-term prisoners feared freedom as much as they desired it. Lying here, you understand why. Sleep comes fitfully. You dream of gates opening. But there's always another gate behind them. Another fence. Another list. You wake with your heart racing. Then force it to slow. Dreams are free here, but they're not always kind. As dawn approaches, you realize something quietly profound. Freedom, if it comes, won't feel like rescue. It will feel like disorientation. Like being dropped into deep water after learning to live in shallow, freezing streams. You don't know if your name will ever be called. You don't know if you want it to be. For now, you do what you've learned to do best. You get ready for another day. The realization comes slowly, then all at once. The camp hasn't stayed behind the fences. It's moved in with you. You notice it in small, almost embarrassing ways. How your shoulders tense when someone raises their voice. How you instinctively count people in a room. How silence feels safer than conversation. Even here, even now, your body behaves like it's still being watched. You used to think confinement was physical. Barbed wire, gates, guards. Over time, you've learned it's also internal. The rules you memorized to survive haven't expired just because the day ends. They follow you into sleep, into thought, into the narrow margins where you used to keep dreams. Historically, many survivors wrote that leaving the Gulag did not mean leaving it behind. Long after release, they found themselves waking early, rationing food that was suddenly plentiful, flinching at ordinary noises. Historians still debate whether this lingering discipline was trauma or adaptation refusing to stand down. Sitting on your bunk, listening to the familiar creaks of wood and breath. It feels like both, two sides of the same scar. Work today is unremarkable, which has become its own kind of milestone. No incidents, no lists, no punishments. The camp hums along, efficient and indifferent. You move through it with practiced ease, doing exactly what's required and nothing more. This competence would have impressed you once. Now it just feels inevitable. Lunch passes. Soup, bread. You notice you're eating faster again. A habit you thought you'd broken. Old instincts resurface easily. Scarcity teaches lessons that don't unlearn themselves. In the afternoon, you catch yourself thinking about the camp as normal. The thought startles you, not because it's wrong, but because it's accurate. Normal doesn't mean acceptable. It just means familiar. Historians still argue whether normalization was the system's greatest cruelty. Standing here, you feel its quiet effectiveness. Back in the barracks, someone new arrives, thin, uncertain, eyes scanning everything. You recognize that look immediately. It's yours. From another time, you watch him place his things too carefully. Hesitate before sitting. Listen more than he speaks. Without thinking, you offer a small, practical tip. Nothing emotional. Just enough to help him get through tomorrow. The cycle continues. Lying down, you reflect on how easily the camp reproduces itself inside people. Not intentionally, not maliciously, just through repetition, through necessity, through the simple fact that survival requires habits. And habits don't ask where they came from. Historians still debate whether people ever truly left the Gulag behind. Tonight, you suspect the answer depends on what leaving means. Physical distance is one thing. Undoing learned vigilance is another. As sleep approaches, you don't think about escape or release or the future. You think about rest, about conserving what remains, about being ready. The camp taught you that readiness is everything. And even in stillness, you remain ready. You don't hear the word legacy in the camp. It's not a useful term here. Legacy implies intention, memory preserved on purpose. What exists instead is residue. The quiet imprint left behind by systems that move on without ever cleaning up after themselves. You feel it in the routines that no longer surprise you. In the way you and the others anticipate shortages before they happen. In the way new arrivals learn. Quickly. By watching. The camp doesn't need to explain itself anymore. It reproduces its logic through behavior. Through example. Through absence. Historically, the Gulag outlived many of the men who designed it. Camps opened, closed, reopened under different names. Policies shifted, softened, hardened again. What remained consistent was the method: isolate, exhaust, extract. Long after the system officially changed, its habits lingered in institutions, in language, in people who learned to survive by becoming smaller. Historians still debate where the Gulag ends, as a place, as a policy, as an idea. Standing here, you suspect it ends last inside those who lived through it. Work today feels lighter in one sense and heavier in another. Your body knows what to do. Your mind drifts outward, beyond the fence, beyond the tree line, into questions that don't have practical answers. What will be remembered about this place? Numbers? Dates? Or the quiet calculus you and the others perform every day to remain standing? Lunch arrives. Soup. Bread. You eat, as you always do. But you notice how automatic it's become. You could do this in the dark. You probably have. Someone makes a small joke about writing a manual someday. That's joke number 1. It earns a faint smile. Manuals imply an audience. It's comforting to imagine one. In the afternoon, a guard mentions something offhand, an anniversary. A date that means something elsewhere. It means nothing here. Days don't carry symbolism inside the fence. Still, the idea lingers. Somewhere beyond this place, time is being marked, events being remembered, stories being told. You are part of those stories, whether anyone knows it or not. Back in the barracks, you notice how the older prisoners speak less now. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they've said what matters already. The knowledge has been passed. The habits transferred. The rest is endurance. You sit among them, feeling the strange weight of continuity. Lying down, you think about how history usually frames places like this. As warnings, as lessons, as mistakes never to be repeated. The irony is sharp enough to taste. Systems don't repeat because people forget facts. They repeat because people adapt. Because adaptation looks like success in the moment. Historians still debate whether remembering the Gulag prevents its return or merely reshapes it. You don't have an answer. You only have the quiet certainty that what happens here doesn't stay here. It travels, carried by those who leave, by those who survive, by those who tell the stories softly so it doesn't break them. As sleep approaches, the camp settles into its familiar hum. Wind, wood, breath. You close your eyes, aware, not dramatically, not fearfully, that you are part of something larger than your own survival. Not a hero. Not a symbol. Just a witness who learned how to last. And sometimes, in history, that's enough. The end doesn't arrive with clarity. It rarely does here. There's no final bell, no clean line you step across where everything suddenly makes sense again. Instead, things begin to slow, almost imperceptibly. Like a machine winding down without anyone announcing it. The days are still full, but they feel softer at the edges. Not kinder, just quieter. You work, you eat, you rest. The routines continue, but your awareness drifts outward now. Less tethered to immediate danger. You notice the sky more often. The way light shifts across the ground. The sound of wind moving through structures that were never meant to feel temporary. Yet somehow do. Your body is thinner than it once was. Harder in some places, weaker in others. You move carefully, but without panic. You know how to exist here. That knowledge settles around you like an extra layer of clothing, worn, patched, but reliable. You think back, briefly, to the person who arrived, the one who still expected explanations, Who thought survival was about strength or courage? The comparison feels distant now, like remembering someone you once sat next to on a long train ride. Familiar, but no longer intimate. Historians still debate where endurance crosses into transformation, whether surviving systems like this changes who you are permanently or simply adds weight you carry differently afterward. Standing here, breathing evenly, you feel the answer isn't simple. Some parts of you bent, some hardened, some went quiet and never quite returned. As night settles, the camp sounds soften, less movement, fewer whispers. The rhythm slows. You lie down and let your body rest in the shape it's learned fits best. Pain is there, but it's distant now, dulled by familiarity. Your thoughts stretch longer, gentler. You're no longer scanning for threats. You're not rehearsing tomorrow. You're simply present. And in that presence, something loosens. You realize that surviving this place was never about defeating it. It was about moving through it without disappearing entirely. About keeping enough of yourself intact that memory still has somewhere to live. Your breathing evens out, slow, steady. The images blur, the fences, the snow, the barracks, softening at the edges like fog lifting. You remind yourself, quietly, that you are here now. Safe enough, warm enough, listening. Nothing is required of you anymore. No quotas. No counting. No vigilance. Just rest. So let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Let the day finally release you. The story fades, gently, without urgency. And in the quiet that follows, there's nothing left to do but sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.